Alright, macro photography workflow. Let's look at this. So these are the end results that we're going to get. And this is just an overview, not step by step. So just want to show you I'm using a drill and I'm taking this little tiny twig right here and I'm going to go ahead and scan that. I'm going to put it on this pin and I'm going to put it on a turntable and turn it. I always like to measure just so I can see how big this is and just get a real world size. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole in the bottom of this and I'm going to put it on top of that pin. So I got to find the right drill bit, and I don't want to get a drill bit that's too big. It needs to be snug. I don't want it wiggling around. So I'm just measuring it up to the pin, and it's going to take my smallest one. So just make sure that you are careful and not drilling anything you shouldn't be, of course. And here we go. So obviously getting right in the center is the best thing. This thing actually was kind of soft in the center. Sometimes branches are, so that was easy. Later in the video I'll show some bigger branches. Now normally I use something like a screw, but this branch was so small that I had to go with like a tack. It's basically like a large tack. So that's what I'm going to do, is basically glue it onto a little piece of wood, and that little piece of wood is screwed into another screw that's on another piece of wood. That screw has a 3/8 inch thread on the bottom of it. So I'll show that later so you can see what I'm talking about. And here I'm just struggling to get the bottom of the glue out because it was almost empty. And then you want to try to center it, get it like right smack in the center. And my little block that was in the middle was not quite in the middle, so I have it a little offset, but it works out in the end. And then here I'm going to measure it. I want to get a circumference, and that is about 5 centimeters. And then I want to make sure that the length that I get is at least twice the circumference, so 10 centimeters. So that way I can have a texture that goes twice as long as it is wide. So I know the section now that I want to get. And then we have the diameter and the radius. Okay, here's a bigger piece that I've done. And that's a different block, and I have a screw going into it. Basically it's like a screw that has a threaded end. Here's my camera. That's a Olympus EM1 Mark III with a 30mm macro, and that's that big screw I was talking about. On the other end of it, it has threads. So, and that's what it would look like if you're going to do some bigger branches, something like that. Of course, if you don't have all these tools, you could just go outside and walk around a tree. But if you want to get, you know, some really, really tight scans, using some of these tools will get you some interesting results. So I'm just screwing that onto my Edelkrone. And my Edelkrone, I believe it's a Dolly 1, I think it's called, or something like that. It's just the one that rotates. And I'm just hooking it up with the camera app. And I'm going to test it and make sure that everything's turning correctly. So now it's turning. I'm just using the manual pan, but then eventually I'm going to use the 360, which I have set to steps, and that will go in 10 degrees increments. So that way it'll get 36 per revolution, and it will be really, really good overlap. So there we go. I just tested everything. Everything's fine. And so here you see I actually have the Edelkrone triggering the camera to fire. So I don't have to keep hitting the button or anything like that. So I have a wire that goes right to my trigger. and here's a top view. You can see it's the same thing, and it's doing it automatically. So I can basically just stand off to the side or go do something else and let this thing work. So okay, now we're into the meta shape. I'm just dragging all the pictures in. I have post-processed them. I have different videos on that, so I'm not going to go over that here. But basically, I'm just aligning them, and this is my tie points. So this is basically the camera alignment points. And I like to go ahead and straighten everything out so that it's in the right orientation, because it makes it much easier to build a low poly mesh. So I'm just going through the steps of basically straightening it out and aligning it and getting it in the right space, because it doesn't always come in correctly for some reason. It would really be nice if it did, but it doesn't. So you have to kind of do that. And now I'm shrinking the domain, basically the area which Metashape will look to build information. So if you limit this to exactly what you want, you can actually get basically all of your computer's resources working on just the area you want and not outside areas, and you get like better results. So I definitely go in different orthographic views and make sure I get it just right before I start building. So now I'm just going to build, and here's the results. 113 million faces. Yes. And we're going to look at the shaded view without the color, because you can see the shape a lot better. So you can see how amazing that looks. And here we go. I'm in Maya, so I just exported a lower poly. I did a decimation, and I exported a lower poly version of the branch, and I smoothed it a little bit too. So now I'm going to build a low poly to bake to, and basically I keep the UVs nice and square and just align them, and I'm going to fill up just half of the space for the UVs, like the 0 to 1 space. I only fill up half of it, so it's going to be twice as tall as it is wide, and that'll basically give me a tiling texture. Once I tile it, it'll give me a texture that it won't look like it repeats as much, because it's really tall. So right now I'm just scaling it so it's hitting the halfway mark, and it's the scale. I don't like to scale in stretch textures, but you can, with this technique, you can scale the UVs in the material, you know, so you can fix them so they look just right. So now I'm just taking a lattice and I'm kind of fitting it, fitting the lower poly mesh that I'm going to bake to around the decimated mesh that I brought in. Make sure it's like just right on there. And I actually shrink it to it like a little bit even smaller. I don't show that part here, but I actually make it so it's just inside of it. And here's the high poly again. That's all the information that we're going to bake out. So you can see, you're just looking at it again, all the information's there, and we're going to bake out all the different steps. So we're going to get a color map and a normal map and an ambient occlusion map. And as I'm showing how you bake that now, I don't actually do it because I've already done all this stuff, so I can just show it to you. There's the normal map, there's the ambient occlusion map, and then I have a height map too. And I'm showing how you would save the height map. So with the height map, you want to save a TIFF. Because it's going to be 16-bit or 32-bit. With the other ones, I save them as PNGs. And I always say the alpha channel because I want to be able to snap to just where the pixels are here, because you'll see I crop in Photoshop. And so when you look at the size, it's perfect. The size is 8K by 4K. So that's exactly what I want. It'll tile perfectly as it goes around in the horizontal, but we need to tile it vertically manually. So that's what I'm about to do here. So I'm actually just showing how this works. I just basically make a copy and I do an offset, and then I basically mask out some of the areas, and then you get the tile. And then what I do is I copy that mask and I put it into every other texture, and basically do the same process like I'll do an offset and put the mask in there. So here I am just looking at it in Marmoset, so it's a real-time viewer, and just trying to get an idea about the fidelity. So you can see you can get right up next to it, and even though this started off as just a tiny little thing, it's or little object, it actually holds up and could be made much larger in a game. So it's very interesting, and there's a lot of detail in there. You know, you can find a variety of different branches. So here's just passing the light over it, and that's about it. So that's an overview, and I have a lot of tutorials on how to go through this stuff step by step. but now you can see sort of the process that that I go through to get some of these results. So but if you don't have all this stuff, just go out there with your cell phone and clean your lens off and walk around a tree and take good pictures. Try to fill the frame as much as you can. Alright, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching.